Hello my friends, it is your brother Hampton from Hybrid Calisthenics. Today we're going to talk about an exercise called the L-sit. It's not quite as hard as the V-sit or the I-sit, but it is a bit harder than the N-sit. Yeah, there's a lot of letters involved. Now the good news is the L-sit is a good exercise and not that hard when compared to some of the other calisthenics holds. Many people should be able to master it with some practice. Now, that said, some people will struggle a little bit more, some people will find it easier, but either way, it is pretty simple to explain. In fact, I've explained it in 60 seconds or less in a short. I'll show it here and link it down below if you want the abridged version. In this video, I'll try to give a little bit more detail. Now that said, just like with many other exercises that we talk about, there are easier variations of the L-sit if you can't do one or can't do one yet, and you can use these variations, you can use these progressions to build your way up to the L-sit. And while you're doing that, these exercises are also very worthwhile in their own right. Most of them will train your core strength and your hip strength isometrically, which works really well for some people. It's a great way to build strength and muscle in some cases. And if you have some kind of joint issue, especially in your hips, you might like this kind of exercise more than, say, a sit-up or leg raise. Because you're not moving during this exercise, joint issues don't tend to be as exacerbated. So just experiment and see what you like. On the other hand, if you don't have some reason why you don't want to do dynamic exercise, then you may want to consider building up to some leg raises, and especially hanging leg raises, before you start pursuing the L-sit. You will progress faster, build strength faster, and probably get there faster overall. Okay, let's talk a bit about where we can do this exercise and what equipment we need. Fundamentally, you don't really need any equipment because you can do one with just your palms on the ground, on the floor, like this. But it is a little bit harder than the other variations, not necessarily if you're holding completely still, but because your legs have less room to go down. So doing it on the ground like this is usually considered a harder variation. But if you want to move up a little bit, or you have some good finger strength, some people do it on their fingers, like so, like that. It's kind of hard to talk while I do these L-sits. Probably should film them separately, but I'm just trying to give you guys an overlay. Some people, if you don't have the finger strength, or especially if you have some issue with your wrist, you may want to consider doing it on your knuckles like this. You can put some cushion, or you can do a padding or a yoga mat or anything like that. Like this. That also works. Easier on the wrist. And probably one of the main reasons people buy parallettes, one of the reasons, is to do L-sits on. So if you have something like this, I know a lot of people sell these kinds of wooden parallettes, and I do think they're worthwhile to have. I have some myself. But if you don't want to spend the money, then you can just use some dumbbells, or you can even build your own. I've done a video on how to build the DIY parallettes like this. But yes, generally speaking, the higher the platform, the easier, up to around the point of your waist or so. And as you'll see later in the video, you can do one on a chair, especially if you don't weigh that much and you can find a stable chair. In that sense, you don't really need any of this equipment other than the floor. I don't know if you can do any of these exercises without a floor. Just floating around in space, or you're floating around in the ocean. Well, I guess you could do L-sits. Never mind. It'd just be an easier variation of an L-sit. I just realized, because of the way I usually film my stuff, a lot of this won't technically be an L-sit because I'm facing the other way, so it's kind of like a reverse L-sit. I don't know if you can still count it or not. Okay, before we get into the progressions, let's quickly talk about how to progress, because how you train these progressions is going to be a significant determining factor in whether or not you succeed. I often tell people that if they're having trouble going from one progression to another in any kind of calisthenics exercise, then you want to think about whether or not it's the right progression, or you may be training incorrectly. For example, to use an extreme example, if you only train something for one set once a month, even if it's a perfect progression from one to the other, you're probably not going to make as much progress because you aren't training enough. On the other end of the spectrum, you might be training too much if you train multiple times a day and you're not giving your body any time to recover. But don't let that stress you out too much, because while yes, unfortunately, there are some bad ways to train that are inefficient, there are also very, very many good ways to train. It's not an exact science. There are very many different program templates that can work. I'm just trying to help you troubleshoot. So the way I recommend training isometric bodyweight exercises is relatively simple. We simply find a variation of the exercise that we can do competently and safely with good form, and we work that around 3 times a week, 3 non-consecutive days. On those training days, we get ready, warm up, go into the hold for as long as we can, and then take a break for a few minutes and then repeat. And we do this 5 or 6 times. Now, if you're familiar with some of my other fitness content, then you know that I recommend training until we hit a certain goal before we move on. For example, if we're training push-ups, then we may want to work kneeling push-ups until we can do, say, 2 sets of 25, and then we move on to full push-ups. Now, with isometrics, we can't quite do that because we're not doing repetitions. So we measure our progress with time. Now, in my opinion, for all of the progressions we'll talk about today, you should aim for a hold of at least 6 to 9 good seconds with good form before moving on. You might be able to go beyond that with some form that's deteriorating and falling apart a bit, but we're looking for 6 to 9 seconds of good form. Honestly, ideally 9. The reason I add different changes in our progression standard is to keep things interesting, but really for something like this, the difference between 6 and 9 is relatively minuscule in the grand scheme of things, and spending more time on an earlier progression is rarely a waste of time. So for some of the easier variations, we'll go with 9, and for some of the harder ones, we'll go down to 6. But really, if you want to spend more time on something, especially if you struggle with a harder variation, then spend more time on it. Okay, let's get into the progressions. I don't have my good yoga mat today. That's the downside of moving, so we are using a beach towel. The first progression is just the hollow body hold. Almost anyone can at least try to do this, but lean back like this, come up, and just hold for time. If you're unable to flex at all, then you can just lean back like this and try to flex up a little bit. Your arms and your legs may not move, but you're still working your core. And conversely, to make it harder, you can just go a little bit higher. If the regular one is like this, going up a little bit like this makes it just a little bit harder. Next, we can do something called a lying jackknife hold. So if you've done leg raises before, you can just go up like this, hold the top part, and then try to touch your toes or your ankles. Hang on, it's bugging me that my pants aren't even here. So one thing you may have noticed from these first 2 progressions is that both of them really involve flexing at the waist a bit. And I think the way modern fitness culture has some people a little bit scared to flex at the waist. It's just part of normal human function, healthy human function. And if you're unable to do that, then you may want to consider some lower back stretches to help you get to this point. Because if you lock out your lower back, then you're really working your hip flexors more so than your core or your abs. So you want to consider being able to flex at the waist for just about all these variations. So just to show again, with the lying jackknife hold, up like this, and you have to, your hips are already flexed, so you have to flex up with your waist like this. And again, my shorts are just not playing ball here. Who knows? Now this next progression might even seem a little bit easier if you were really going hard on the previous 2, because it's less variable. So you can raise your legs up like this, and just do this. For this one, I am going to look into my camera monitor to make sure I am centered and somewhat horizontal, which it looks okay. But either way, from here, we can slowly begin to extend our legs, which is the next progression, but we'll notice that we want to fall back when we do that. You can have your arms out like this, which is a little prettier if you can not fall over. You can just keep your hands in front of you while you're doing this exercise. Behind you works too if you want a slightly easier variation. Now from here, the progressions start to get significantly harder. I included these first 3 so anyone watching this video can have something they can try if they want some kind of isometric core exercise. But really getting to this point and beyond, if you are able to just build up with some leg raises and hanging leg raises, then you'll really be able to progress through these earlier stages and ones beyond much faster, in my opinion. Okay, hello my friends, it is your brother Hampton from Hybrid Calisthenics. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee with... That's not what we're doing. Where is my coffee? That's right, it's Tuesday, it's not coffee day. Anyway, so this next exercise does involve a chair or any kind of secure and stable horizontal parallel railings like this. I have to emphasize, like I said at the beginning, that you should only try this, you should only do it if you feel like it can support your weight. I don't know what chair you're looking at, and I don't know how much you weigh. Some people watching this may be 500, 600 pounds, in which case your chair may not be able to support your weight. But for this, you just sit down, adjust yourself a little bit, fix your hair, and then go up like this. Now, if it is a little bit too hard, you can go down. This will be a little bit easier. But if you let it hang down too much and your legs are just resting against the chair, then you're really not getting that much of an exercise. The challenge of this is really getting you to support your full weight on your arms like so. Here's a different angle if you want to see it. Now it is kind of up to you to do these in socially acceptable places. If you just start busting these out in a Red Lobster chair, they may look at you kind of funny. Now, random fun fact, I know it's not Red Lobster, but I went to Olive Garden so often in my college years that I was invited to their employee Christmas party of 2015. I like cheese. All right, we're back to the ground now with something called an N sit. It's basically what you were doing before, but with your legs up a little bit higher to make the letter N. Is this the letter N? Can't quite tell. If it isn't, I'll flip it. One thing you may want to consider as you're going through these steps is to not let yourself shrug up too much. So if you're doing the hold, you don't want to move up your shoulders too much like this. You want to unshrug yourself like this. And after you're used to the N hold, you can try some single leg variations like this. The slower you do it, the harder it is. So just experiment. You may have noticed I shake a little bit during these exercises. The balance portion of these kinds of exercises makes it kind of hard to do without shaking, but you're really also giving your arms a good workout. So this is a core workout, but you're really working your arms as well, and your chest, and your whole body. Okay, at this point you're pretty much almost there, so we're gonna try an angle change. And you just want to do a bent knee L sit, like this. Not quite as hard because you're not extending your knees here, but it's a little bit out. And this is very easy to scale because to make it easier, you can bring it in, not too much in because then you'll be doing N hold, and to make it harder, you can go slowly and slowly out until eventually you can just do a proper L sit like this. Here's the side view. It looks a little bit cleaner with your feet pointed, but if you want to flex your feet up, it's more of a stretch for your hamstrings. As mentioned before, after you get better at it, then you can do it with your palms on the ground, or on your fingers, or on your knuckles. By the way, if you want to make these slightly easier, you can just kick off your shoes. They are extra weight. So that's what I had to say for now on the L sit. As I mentioned before, it's a pretty simple exercise to teach and to learn, even if it's not necessarily easy for some people. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. I'll answer them. And if you have already done this, if you know how to do one and you're pretty good at them, then please help answer other people's questions. That's one way the community can help each other. Thank you so much for watching this. I will do more fitness content and more videos for you. Let me know in the comments, once again, what you would like to see and how I can help you. Thank you so much for watching. As usual, I am your brother Hampton from Hybrid Calisthenics. I hope you have a wonderful, beautiful day, my friend.